My celebrity crush is Natalie Portman, and honestly, if she rolled up and she was like rocking Velcro shoes, and I found out it's because she didn't know how to tie her shoes, I would have no effect on me.
Well, you know when you go bowling and they give you Velcro shoes?
Yeah. Well,
well, they give me them because I have a child size.
I was gonna say.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, it's me. I wasn't here last week.
She's back.
It's true.
I
She's
hope
back.
you missed me.
The gang's all here
Yep.
for finally. It's been 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've been here.
Yes, this is true.
I've been here.
I've been missing.
I was enjoying a nice little vacation in Florida.
Wow, good for you, Bridget.
All right.
It was sunny there. I got a sunburn.
Oh, did you? Maybe you should wear
Ew.
some sunscreen next time.
Yeah.
Miss Redhead over here.
Yeah. I don't tan.
All right. What are we talking about?
Well,
On that note,
I'm going to try to talk into the mic today because last time I was like,
You were pretty far away.
help me.
We had an idea of creating a hypotheticals of dogs and maybe like the family setup or lifestyle setup or whatever. And then like what our plan of action would be if they were like a client of ours.
Mm-hmm.
Bridget, do you want to create our first hypothetical?
Yes. Okay. So you get a client.
Mm-hmm.
It's a puppy that is constantly having accidents around the house.
Okay.
Not crated currently in a playpen.
Okay.
Tearing things up a lot, biting, nipping, jumping, excitement level out of control, and then really hard time like breaking them of potty habits.
Got it.
So you're on your first lesson with these people. What are you doing? What are we talking about? Their first lesson.
What's the how many like people are involved in this? Is it just like a couple? Is it a family?
It's a couple that has a child that is 10 years old, and they bought the dog for their child, and their child is failing to adhere to the responsibility of taking care of the dog.
Got it.
So mom and dad are there with the puppy. Everybody's frustrated. They're like standing around. They're like, Judy, you didn't take the dog out. And then Judy's like, Mark, you didn't take the dog out.
damn dog shit in the house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So how are we starting the session? How are we starting to communicate?
I would start out simply by talking about the potty training issue seems to be the biggest stressor.
Mm-hmm.
So the easiest way to address the potty training is to get them on board with using a crate, get them on board with the supervision that's needed. So leashing anytime the dog is not in the crate. I would send them my like mock puppy schedule that I have created that like blocks out times for people on like this is literally how you could follow your day.
Helps them create a schedule of their own.
That they can adapt to. And I would also recommend that they create a log that documents what time of the day and what the puppy did and whether it was an inside accident or whether it was outside so that they can keep track of any patterns they might see of like, wow, every day at 3 p.m. the dog's pooping in the house. Maybe we should add another potty break there. Or those are also useful when you have multiple people handling the dog. Because if you're coming home from work on your lunch break and you don't know what happened when your spouse took the dog out an hour ago, it's hard to know if you need to wait out there for them to poop or if they just need to pee or whatever it is. So those would be like my main points I would hit.
Yeah, definitely be in first session. Also something I would probably touch on as well in terms of talking to the parents is not expecting a 10-year-old to have too much responsibility with the dog.
Yes.
Just because you had mentioned buying the dog for the kid and the kid not exceeding the expectations, a 10-year-old shouldn't have to
I wouldn't
deal
say
with your
this
puppy.
to their face, but that's stupid parenting.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you got a dog for your 10-year-old and you truly believed that they're going to step up to the plate and potty train it and, and do all those things.
Even younger teens.
Even
you know?
teenagers.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
It's just
no.
like
no.
Yeah.
No.
we have to
You are
stop,
the
like,
adult of the
yeah.
household.
Yeah.
You are assuming the responsibility
and
at
putting
that point.
responsibility on a child, like as much as your child is going to say, oh yeah, I'm going to take care of them, I'm going to do everything, they're still a kid.
Yeah.
So ultimately, if you're getting a dog, you have to know that the adults in the household are going to be the primary caretakers of that dog, and you have to commit to that.
Yeah.
And if you feel like you can't do that, maybe it's not the right time for a puppy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like age appropriate involvement. Like
Yeah.
you're in charge of picking up the dog poop. You know, every
Right.
couple days you have to go out in the yard and pick up the dog poop. Or your job is to make sure the dog eats in the evenings.
Yep.
So you feed the dog in the evenings.
Yep.
Like those are very age appropriate things. Or if I ever ask you to let the dog outside to go to the bathroom, you have to do it.
Yeah.
But to expect them to be able to maintain a schedule
Right.
and
Yeah.
time management
Especially
and all
with
of that
a
stuff.
puppy having so many of those little like puppy issues, the jumping, the
Yeah.
barking, the whatever, you
Yeah.
know, potty issues. Like it's a lot. to
That
deal
would
with.
be
that's
like-
stressful even for the adults, you know.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
it's a lot to put on.
It's be like
younger
having an
person.
infant and then being like, okay, here's your new baby.
Right.
Take care of it.
Yep.
And I think it's like a great responsibility to bring a dog in and like teach your kids like how to be responsible for it. And but you have to do it, like you said, in age appropriate ways that is going to be beneficial. But ultimately, you know that the responsibilities of the dog falls to the adults in the house.
Yeah.
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 For sure.
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. It's okay to give them some responsibilities, like you said, like easier tasks and stuff, but probably still something I would be supervising just to
Yes.
make sure, you know, but
Absolutely.
yeah, I like that.
So they come in for their lesson. They say, we don't want to use a crate, but we want the potty training to be fixed.
I say, well, those two things can't be true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
They are incompatible.
Yep.
Yeah. And why would you say they're incompatible?
Because we have to have somewhere we can put the dog. We cannot watch the dog 24/7. And so we have to be able to put the dog somewhere and be 100% confident that they will not have an accident. And the only way that you can have that is with a crate.
Yep.
Nothing else is going to be confined and small enough to ensure that.
And even in the development stage, we have to kind of assume responsibility through a long period of time. Like I have an 8-month-old puppy that I'm working with, and she just called me and she was like, he's peeing in the house and he's doing it behind my back all the time. And that to me, potty issues like that are a supervision issue.
Yeah.
And maybe a scheduling issue rather than the dog is not just going to naturally grow out of that behavior. And we have to continue to create a good potty schedule and a good crating schedule through like 2 years old until the dog is fully developed and able to understand boundaries. And sometimes that takes much longer than people anticipate.
Yep.
Yep. I don't, like with Snoop, I didn't allow him to be unsupervised loose in my house until he was at least 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Like I treated him like he was a puppy until he was
Yeah.
like 2 years old.
And that's what people don't like kind of fail to realize sometimes is that the responsibility is a little bit more than you think it is. It's not just initially potty training for 2 weeks and then the dog is free to be in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still to this day, like Pip, none of my dogs actually are not crated.
Yeah.
So they're all crated whenever I leave the house.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine are all crated whenever I leave
And
too.
I think it's important to say too, the whole crating thing with the potty training, it's not this like punishment where you find they went to the bathroom and then you go
you're like-
put them in the crate.
Yeah.
It's
you scrap them and
preemptively.
drag them into the crate.
Yes, it's preemptively putting them in the crate so that they don't go and crap behind the couch and then you
Yes.
smell
So you
it
can
later
be a
in the day.
person and like go do your dishes and take a shower and do things, get the kids dinner on the table without always having to be like, where's the puppy? I have to
Yes.
get the puppy.
and I would
That
even
extra stress you don't need, you know?
Yeah, and I would expand beyond it to bringing the conversation even outside of potty training and talk about the importance of like the independence and the confidence building that comes from crating a dog at a young age. Because if they're not putting it in the crate, then they're probably already sleeping with it, which is a terrible habit to start doing when they're that young. And that creates so much an anxious attachment style with the dog. You're going to have separation anxiety. You're going to have all of these different things. And so on top of, because like, I mean, maybe theoretically say somebody could argue with me that like, nope, I can supervise my dog 24/7 because I work from home and I don't have friends and I don't go anywhere and I'm all blah, 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 blah. Someone's always with the dog. Okay, well then what are you teaching your dog? That they can't
Yeah.
ever be alone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They need to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
They need to have alone time, because unavoidably, eventually, they're going to have to at some point.
Yeah.
And if you're not preparing them for that as they're like maturing and they're growing, it's going to be a freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
When
You
one
do
day it
leave
just
the
has to
house.
happen.
Yep.
Yeah. So, good
Yep.
things to look out for is like don't minimize the value of crate training in the early life and continuing on with those good habits.
It's so key
Mm-hmm.
to everything,
Yeah.
honestly. Safety,
Yeah.
the mental development, the emotional development, the potty, like literally everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I was like a younger woman, I did not crate train one of my dogs. And
Was this Nelson?
no, it's Minnow.
Minnow.
So I was young when I got him, and the destruction that happened in that apartment, like,
Did you
I
just
did
have,
not get-
did you just
learning
have
lesson.
a flashback?
I did not get my security deposit back.
Yeah.
Learning
He
lesson.
tore the carpet up, and I was like, what can I do? And then whenever I put him in the crate,
You were one of those people that was
Yeah.
like, my dog's doing all these things wrong. What should I do?
And then
people
you
tell
try
you crate,
to-
and you're like, I would never do that.
you like try to avoid the crate because the dog is screaming in the crate, and then you're in an apartment, so you can't have the dog screaming. So there's some situations that you just have to be prepared for if you're going to bring a puppy into like an apartment or condo setting, and realizing that crate training is not always going to be beautiful, and the puppy's going to yell and scream sometimes, and you just kind of have to let them, and you have to commit to that being able to happen.
Yep.
And sometimes, maybe when you're in an apartment, getting a puppy isn't a good idea.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
getting a dog is a privilege. It's
Yes.
not a right.
Yeah.
So you really have to think that stuff through. Like, I know a number of people that don't have a dog because they live in an apartment. And they're like, I'm going to wait until I live in a house somewhere or have a different living arrangement where I can do everything the right way and not worry about the dog screaming or
Yeah.
barking or all this kind of stuff.
Potty training, like when I lived in an apartment, was so much more difficult because you had to walk down the stairs and put your coat on, and you can't just let them out into the backyard. And you'd have to walk around to the apartment complex for some time until they went. And then if they didn't go, you're repeating that step every like 45 minutes
Or they
until
go
they go.
too soon. It's like you're like they know they're going to the bathroom, but the elevator takes a little long, and then they just pee in the elevator or something like
Yeah.
that, you know. But that's,
And
that's
it's such
very
a
common.
distracting environment. Like you
Yeah.
take your dog out, and with puppies, it's like ideally when you're on a potty break, you want it to be like minimal distractions, nothing is happening, so they can focus on the task and what they're doing. But in an apartment, you have people coming in and out, and dogs coming in and out, and
It's a lot of distractions for a young dog. And how I moved past the crating issue is that I finally did start crating him, and it was a little bit of screaming and yelling, and I just had to kind of accept that. And now he's completely fine in the crate, and I'm glad that I do it, and I still do it to this day.
Yeah.
because he is a marker in my house, and he can't be doing that. You
Yeah.
know?
no, you can't be
The
doing
sooner you crate train, the easier it's going to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because like you said, like if you allow them to build that like attachment and that anxiety, or, like the separation anxiety and stuff, it's only going to be harder. you
that. Oh
know?
yeah.
So it's better to do it. And it, you know, if you get a rescue or an older dog or whatever, right? It's not the end of the world.
treat
They
it
can
the
still
same
do it.
thing. Yeah.
Yep. They can
Treat it
still
the
do
same
it.
way.
But you just have to, like you said, just kind of have to let it go.
And just
little
like human children, like they're not always going to like everything that you do or say or try to parent them. And dogs are not always going to love their crate or the things that you're trying to teach them. And we have to be accepting that that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, we're not trying to make their life miserable, but we're trying to set them up for success.
Yeah.
So we have to temporarily have a little bit of discomfort in the process of them learning how to be crated and waking up throughout the night to potty them. And, you know, it's hard.
Yeah.
There's some puppy blues sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. You just have to remember, like, you have their best interest in mind. You know, you're not doing, again, it's like crate training in our setting is not a punishment. You know, it's something that it's like, it's for their safety so that they can work through some anxiety or whatever it may be, excitement even, you know, so
I
it
saw
doesn't have to be
something.
that punishment.
I saw like a post on, I don't know which social media thing it was, but it was like, I always like, if someone says that they enjoyed having a puppy, then I always just assume that like they like didn't do any training with it, or like only did potty training and like put no effort into it. And I'm like, what a miserable outlook to have.
Yeah.
Like, you hated having a puppy that much. Like, you thought having to train your dog made having a puppy miserable. It's like, I love having puppies.
Right.
Puppies are like my favorite thing in the world.
I loved like
If I could somehow eventually have a business where like you just give me your puppy and I raise it until it's like a year old and give it back to you, like I will do that. Like the puppy stage is like my favorite part.
Yeah.
there's just so much
Oh, it's
opportunity and like so much growth, and if
There's
you do it right,
Like, you can actually change things with a puppy. Like, when you bring me your adult dog, like, I can't really change things.
Yeah.
But with a puppy, there's like true malleability there. Yeah. Like you can build and take away, and like you can, like you can manipulate it a lot more. But like they're like a little piece of clay, you know. But like you get an old dog, and it's like a hardened sculpture.
Yep. You gotta slowly chip away.
Yeah, so having a puppy doesn't have to be miserable.
It shouldn't. Yeah,
it shouldn't be miserable. No, there will be hard moments, but
absolutely.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, "Girl, are you okay?"
Yeah, that's also something again with like I think the the understanding of having a puppy is the misconception of like, it's a puppy, they're just
they'll grow out
happy
of it,
and they're flopping around, and what bad could come from a puppy. And a lot of people I think overthink the responsibility that it takes, again, like you were saying, like it's just like it's not easy having a puppy necessarily.
Maybe those people are the people that are doing like pointless training.
Yeah.
Like training
really
that does not work
on obedience, or your dog giving paw, and you're focused on the wrong things initially, and you're not creating good habits. Like in the crate, with potty training, with guests coming over, all of those things start really early. And before you ever do like sit or bed or come, like you should really focus on the fundamentals of raising a dog. Rather than being so nitpicky on obedience.
If you're following methodology that says that you can't ever correct your puppy or whatever, then probably it would be miserable, I guess.
Yeah.
Because you're training them in a way that like is pointless. It's not going to be effective. You're not going to see results. You're not going to see like your dog maturing into like someone you like or want to be around. So that's a piece of it too.
Yeah.
Seamus, do you have a hypothetical?
Let me think. First one to come to mind.
He said the beast from Sandlot.
Yes. No.
You get the beast from Sandlot. Your ball goes over the fence.
Yes.
What are you doing?
It's not just
I'm
any
getting a
ball
pair of
too.
Converse.
Yes.
Okay,
It's a Babe Ruth signed ball.
I'm gonna watch that tonight.
It's a good movie.
What a classic.
L7
Guardians have their
weenie.
first game today, so it'll be appropriate. All right. Let's think. Multiple dog household.
Okay.
They're only getting one dog trained though.
Okay.
They brought the one dog because it had nipped at the younger dog that they're bringing in, nipped at the older dog that they've had for 4 years or whatever, over food when they were feeding. They'd never had issues before, but now they're starting to see these issues. Younger dog just turned a little over 1, just about a year old.
Okay. And they've had the older dog for a few years. 5
years or so.
Okay.
And so they don't know what to do. And then the barking's an issue as well.
Got it.
Barking at things.
In the house.
Okay.
And has seemed to make the older dog more reactive while on leash when walking.
Got it.
Okay.
I would initially ask to know the exact situation of like when the younger dog nipped at the older dog. Like what happened in that situation.
Yeah.
My guess, what I would guess, this is what I'm thinking in my head.
I think we're thinking the same thing.
My guess is that they're going to answer me. I'm going to say, tell me exactly what happened. And they're going to answer me and say, well, usually when we feed them, they'll kind of like
go to each other's
bowls and kind of walk around, and it's never been a big deal. And today, like, the younger one was eating or near his bowl even, and the older one walked over like he usually would to go take some of his food or eat out of it, and the younger one like darted back over and snipped at him, or maybe just like leaned over and growled at it. That's how most of the time when I've asked this question, that's the exact situation that they describe. Yeah.
Where there's not enough like boundaries within a good feeding routine. Like if we have a multi-dog household, one thing that you have to have is a good feeding routine. So whether that means at your comfortability level, you're feeding everybody in their crates, or you're establishing some kind of control over the bowl and having the dog, like we do here, not going to their bowls until released. And then there's no going to each other's bowls. Like I will correct for that.
Yep.
And like ideally, we'd like to kind of stick around with the dogs when they're eating and not be like, oh, I'm going to start cooking my dinner. Or get distracted and then take your eyes off of two dogs eating at the same time. Because that could go south very quickly.
Yes.
So how about this then? All right. So now that like pretending to be
give us
client,
more
right?
information.
Yeah.
More information.
So the older dog does always kind of go over to the other dog's bowl. Older dog chows its food, right? Chows down its food, always goes over to the younger dog. Again, they never had issues with this before, but now with like, dog's now a year old or so, and we're seeing that issue. It's something that what should I do in a situation where they're both gone, but like 15 minutes later, the dogs are over at the bowls again? Right? Or if there's an issue, there's no food in the bowls.
Food is gone, feeding time is done, and then we leave the bowls on the ground, and the dogs go back to it and they fight over the bowl. Correct?
Yeah, it's empty. There's no food in it, but the first time this happened, there was food, the younger dog was eating, older dog went over and it nipped. Then a week later, we had another situation where the bowls were empty and the dogs were in the kitchen, and they just started fighting.
Yeah. Pick up your bowls. Part of a good feeding routine is to remove the bowls after the dogs are done with them, even if your dog has never displayed resource guarding over their bowl. Additionally, there's sometimes that fights happen with the association with food. So if you always feed the dogs in the kitchen and then you're cooking dinner and both dogs are in the kitchen with you and it's like a little pinch point, some fights can happen then, or like thresholds, things like that. Just when there's like the perception of food.
Yep.
So that can happen too.
Especially if there's no impulse control being established around the idea of food. Just the mere suggestion of it can immediately, their brains just go bing, right up there.
So, for example, if you're cooking in the kitchen and you drop something on the floor and your dog immediately goes to eat it, you should work on that.
Yes.
In a multi-dog household, if I drop something on the ground, my dogs will not go and scramble for it.
No, they're not allowed.
And then my concern with, I wanted to get this younger puppy for my older puppy so that, my older puppy was a little angel and everything. And now I feel like the other dog's getting worse because of these dogs pulling on the leash, being more reactive, barking out the window. And now this fighting, is this going to be something where like now my older dog is just caught in these habits, even if I'm only training the younger one?
It's like, just like we can't assume that a child is going to have enough responsibility to take care of a puppy by itself. We cannot make it the responsibility of our older dog to teach the younger dog good habits, or vice versa. We can't think that one trained dog is going to rub off on the other dog. We have to individually be able to address and have a good relationship with each dog and end behaviors that are nuisance to us and create good structure and boundaries within the house. And it's never just one dog's issue.
No. Usually I find like, your dog, like the dogs that you had first, their behavior is certainly changing now that you get an additional dog, but they've always been that way. You're just seeing an amplified version of it because there's like they feed off of each other, So it's your older dog, you could venture to say probably upon further discussion, we'd find that oh, he does get really overexcited when people come to the door. He jumps a little bit. He steals food off the counter every once in a while. He's always been really pulley on leash and stuff like that. But now that you have another dog who sees those behaviors from the older dog, and then because he's younger, more physically fit, higher energy, he just takes those behaviors to the next level. Yeah. And then your older dog is like, oh, I want to do that too. And then they just keep feeding off of each other. So what I would typically do is like, I wouldn't immediately off the bat be like, you have to train both. I would say, well, let's get the younger dog under control. And then it sounds like your older dog maybe doesn't need obedience training, but just correct nuisance behaviors. So let's start correcting the older dog for the barking out the window, for the jumping on people, for the counter surfing, for the trying to steal the food from the other dog, for all of those different things. And then once you get some obedience on the younger dog and correct nuisance behaviors, you should have a pretty good overall balance with everything.
Things like allowing both dogs to bark out the window is already creating a lot of frustration and arousal with like barking at something or defending. And we see a lot of the times, whether it's at the fence or door or window, the dogs will redirect on one another at that because the intensity is there. And then they just kind of like go off after each other. So you have to be able to correct that on its own. So you're looking for opportunities that both dogs are doing that. The mailman comes, they both go ballistic. You're correcting that.
Yep.
So creating good habits.
Yeah. That was a good one.
That was a good one. Now I got to think of one.
I feel like that answers all my questions.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of one that's different from those two. Okay. How about a dog comes in and they've had this dog, they adopted it. They've had this dog maybe 7-8 months. Okay. And within the last like 3 to 4 weeks, the dog has started displaying some concerning behaviors when guests come into the house.
Okay.
So there was the first incident was someone had come over, and this was someone the dog had met before multiple times, and things had been okay. Always seemed fine, like a little barky and overexcited when the person come in. But this time the person came in, was setting all their things down, kind of turned around, and the dog like nipped them on the back of the leg. Okay. Didn't break skin, but like ripped their pants, a little bit. And they yelled at the dog and stuff, whatever. And they were like, oh, that's kind of weird, And then maybe like a week or so later, someone came over, a stranger. The dog had never met this person before. Comes in the door, and immediately upon entering the door, the dog bites him right on the hand. Okay. And they're like, okay, we seem to have a problem. And they'd never seen any aggression out of the dog before prior, or anything like that. And so that's, like I said, maybe we've had those 2 incidents over the last 3 weeks. And since that last one, they just don't have anybody over anymore. They don't invite anybody over. Nobody's coming, anything like that.
Yep. Okay.
And that's the initial information you get.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask them about crate training. I'm going to ask, if they have a crate routine currently, because that can be a really big piece. Not that we're avoiding the dog from interacting with guests, but initially it can be really difficult to try to manage a guest coming through the door and the dog. And we can talk about like, what is the dog barking outside of the window? Is it barking when the mailman comes to the door? Is the dog super reactive as it's starting to settle into your home and feel more comfortable? And I would just kind of like ask those initial questions and just get like a feel for, oh no, we never crate the dog. And then we would talk about like correcting some of those behaviors. So the nuisance behaviors, the barking at people, not in our first lesson, obviously, because we, for the most part, we don't start e-collar right away. So those are just my information gathering questions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Either way, addressing like the behavioral stuff and everything, but also I'd like to kind of like understand why, like, is it anxiety? Is the dog scared? And these people that they bit the hand, they immediately tried walking in the door and tried petting this dog that they didn't know? Or is it something that, the dog's just is allowed to go up there and is a little aggressive? That would be something I would be curious about. I feel like most of the time it's more the anxiety and just not that understanding of like, you can't control the situation. But something, crating is obviously a go-to, probably the smartest situation at first, but then you could obviously also get to like a bed stay as well if working up to that point. But
get into the meat and bones of the training, like telling them what to correct for, and then maybe offering a bed stay and saying, what does your dog do when it's happy to see somebody? Like if it's the owner's coming home, is your dog jumping all over you and just out of control excitement? Because if the pendulum swings in the way of the dog being super excited and we have no control over it and we're like, oh, this is harmless behavior, how are we going to expect to have any control if the pendulum swings the other way and the dog is not happy and suspicious of who's coming through the door?
Yeah.
So whether the dog is displaying its behaviors in a really hyperactive way or a really fear aggressive way or dominant way, we have to be able to address those and show the dog, like, people coming through the door, they're not here for you.
Yeah.
And you don't get to decide who's okay and who's not. And a lot of people will be like, well, I want my dog to defend my house. That's not their job.
Right.
No.
And and I think, like you said, both sides of the pendulum, both sides of the spectrum, whatever, is that the dog is getting very reactive either way, right? That is reactivity, whether it's the excitement or the anxiety or them just being mad. So it's something that I think you definitely need to control those situations. So I guess first steps, talk about the crating and address a way of or find a way of addressing those initial issues of the behavioral stuff.
Just I'm dealing with such a similar situation with one of my clients now currently. And the dog was so scared and fearful and shut down that for many weeks she was not displaying any of these behaviors. And then she's starting to get comfortable. She's just starting to be like, this is my house.
That's what I was going to say. What are you going to tell them when they go, but she's been so good up until this point.
Yeah.
Like this came out of nowhere.
Yeah, they're getting
What's
comfortable.
causing it?
So it's just like they're adjusting to the house. They're changing and they're getting more comfortable and confident with their space. And they're not that shy little scared puppy that was rescued off the street. And we can't continue to victimize dogs and be like, but their past was so bad, so we can't do anything to control their behavior now. Yes, you can.
And they're building an attachment to the owner,
Yes.
as well. So if it, and I forget, in this situation, it's a younger pup, right? You said like 7 or 8 months? Or
They've had it for about
okay.
7 or 8 months. I would say, you could say that maybe the dog's like 2.
Yeah.
Or something.
Right. And then, so that would be like is it like...
Probably a German Shepherd, let's be honest.
Right. So something where, you're bringing in...
A lab mix.
You're bringing in, the conversation of the sexual maturity and, changes in behavior. The puppy that you got at 4 months old or whatever, is going to be different at 2 years old, depending on what habits you've allowed to kind of
Fester
routinely
and grow.
go.
And like the dog that you bring home initially, just like starting a new job where you have a honeymoon phase and you're like, this job is great. I love it so much. And then you're like seeing the issues and holes within the new job and you're like, damn, like I'm starting to get comfortable. I'm going to start speaking up for myself.
Yeah.
I'm going to start like seeing what I can get away with here. And it really...
Just test limits.
Yeah, you test limits and then you get away with it because the owners feel bad for the dog or they feel bad for their past or they're so glad that they're starting to display confident behaviors. But we have to be able to check the dogs.
Yeah.
So I'd say maybe session 2, if this were one-on-one lessons, so we'd start correcting all that barking. We'd start correcting any reactivity outside of the house. We'd start working on a bed stay. We'd start incorporating crate time. So if we needed to use our crate for a longer term guest, then we're capable of doing that without our dog freaking out that they're not part of that. And we'd maybe have some guests come over that are just solely there to help train the dog. Like they come in the door, they visit for a little bit. Nobody interacts with the dog. Nobody tries to pet the dog.
Yeah.
Getting the dog used to neutrality with people coming in.
Yeah.
That's another good point to make too, is making sure that you have the conversation, that we talk to the owner about having the conversation about guests, about making sure that that
Respectful
person
boundaries.
that's never met the dog doesn't just go and put their hands right in their face and immediately try to like become friends with it.
Like, all dogs love me, and the guest is like on the floor with the dog, and the dog's in the corner like cowering,
Yeah.
wail
And a lot of times that's probably what's been happening before the dog then started the nipping.
Yep.
You might think that for the last 7 months, your dog's been having a great time with you.
Yeah.
But every time people come over, they're petting it and they're in its face and they're never leaving it alone. And they're just so excited because you have a new dog now and all this stuff. And every time now the dog is like, man, every time someone comes through that door, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
Like, I'm either so happy and overstimulated and excited, or I'm miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there's an in between, and they can feel a little bit of both, or their social battery can run out. Or they can get overwhelmed by people. If somebody's watching a football game and they're screaming and yelling.
Yep.
And then people are just constantly trying to interact with your dog without consent.
Yeah.
Like, we have to realize that like I said in a couple podcasts, that we have to give dogs autonomy.
Yeah.
And if they want to move away and they don't want to visit with your guest, by all means, let them.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think on that one, the like name of the game is like creating good management to avoid potential situations that are going to be problematic until you have the tools set in place to be able to directly like address
Yes.
them.
So,
Yeah. Like I was talking to a woman today that she just adopted a corgi that has some like resource guarding and stuff. And she was asking for just some basic advice. And I told her that you have to basically manage the dog with the crate and with a leash so that you aren't able to allow it to do these behaviors until you have training techniques in place to address it when it happens. Because the more you allow the dog to rehearse something like that without being prepared to directly address it and make sure the dog gets accurate feedback on whatever it's doing, then you're just allowing them to perpetuate the habit more and more and more at that point.
and grow stronger. Like, it's the same if you're not using tools on a dog, like initially a puppy, and you're trying to get them to come. Like, you need to have a leash on them at all times, because you need to enforce good habits of, I tell you come, and I'm going to physically make you come to me before we're in the meat and bones of the training.
Yeah. And again, and like even to that point, it's like, obviously a puppy too, like you're still in that teaching phase. They're not going to just be like, oh yeah, I know come it. You know what I mean? Like it's something you have to show them. Otherwise, if you're allowing them to try to figure it out too soon, then obviously they're going to confuse themselves, or they're not going to do it right. Or maybe they might get lucky one time because they see you squat down holding treats and they run over to you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's like that light bulb goes off right away. You know?
So, like, your management in that situation can look like creating the first couple times guests come over until we have the tools available to the dog and able to communicate to them that those behaviors are inappropriate.
Yeah.
Because if they can't perform good habits around guests, we kind of have to avoid that situation until we can better communicate and we build trust in our dogs. And the dog develops trust in us that we're not going to allow people to come in and get into your face. And we have standards.
Yep.
Like, actually, I just finished training with Zool, that greyhound.
Oh yeah.
And like the more we were talking at their last session, when we were just going over like how incredible the change has been with him, because he was biting his own owners over putting collars on and taking his coats on and off, and him being a greyhound, like they got to wear coats.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so like important, necessary things, right? And so obviously a lot of it was just a lack of respect, right? So the dog was like, if I don't like something, I can bite you, and then that's effective and it works, and I have no problem doing that. And obviously once your own dog starts biting you, you are very hesitant around them, so your behavior changes, you're not comfortable, you're not bold in what you're doing, and then the dog feeds off of that, and then it's just like a vicious cycle. But so it's been months now that hasn't had any issues like that, which has been great. But what was interesting, I got like another piece of the puzzle, that like obviously like I knew exactly how to address it. we made all this progress. Things were going great. But then when I was talking to them at the last lesson and they mentioned this piece of like their history and relationship with him, I was like, that was the missing piece that now made it all make sense to me, was because I was trying to like navigate, like, he's not really a nervous dog. He's not like, he's a little uncomfortable in new environments, but overall, like, he's a pretty well-adjusted guy. And I was like, and he's not overly like confident and like assertive either, you know? So I was kind of trying to figure out like, what is his real motive behind what he's doing? Other than, but I knew it was relationship based because the dog never tried to bite me ever once. He's boarded here. He's never tried to bite any of the staff over that stuff. It was literally just them.
Yeah.
And I think there were a couple times with guests that guests would come over. Zool would actually like come up to them and want affection and pets, and they'd be petting them, and then all of a sudden he'd snap at them.
Yeah.
You
Like
know,
a
and they're
cat.
like, why is that happening? You know, so somewhat weird-ish behaviors. And so, but then this piece of the information that was like put it all together was they said that the first, you know, few months that they had him, they'd never seen any of these aggressive behaviors, and he was more affectionate then. And I like probed a little bit and I asked more, and I was like, well, what do you mean by like more affectionate?
Right.
I was like, was he seeking out like affection from you guys? Was he like trying to come up and snuggle with you, whatever? And one of them was like, oh, well, now that I'm thinking about it, I was more affectionate with him. Like, I was constantly seeking him out. I was wanting to cuddle with him. I was wanting to pet him more. I was wanting to engage with him more. And he was like, and then over time it started being, he'd be on the couch and I'd come sit down next to him and he would leave.
And you chase him down. And
Or
try to pet him.
yes. And stuff like
Or
that.
like demand him to come back.
Yeah. And so then as he's telling me this, I'm like, this is making so much sense. I'm like, because the dog basically probably never liked any of that you were doing.
He was
you
just
know,
tolerant of it
he was
at
tolerant.
some point, and then he stopped being tolerant of it.
Exactly. And he's like, if you're going to keep pushing past my boundaries of what I don't like, then I'm going to have to tell you to stop. And the tipping point that what we ended up happening was because we put the dog in a situation where he was forced to stand up for himself and be assertive about reasonable boundaries. Now he then extrapolated that to unreasonable boundaries.
Yep.
And
He's
he
like,
said,
sweet, this works.
Yep.
This is a solution.
Yep. He said, fine, if you're not going to respect me in something that, you know, we could probably say is like, okay, that's reasonable. Your dog doesn't want to be hugged. Your dog doesn't want to, whatever. Then the dog says, so now I know biting you will allow me to get away with stuff. So next time you try to put a coat on me, not going to happen. You want to put a collar on, not going to happen. And then it just got worse and worse over time.
Yeah.
And I was like, now that was the missing piece of the puzzle that I was trying to like put together this whole time.
And this is why it is so important for like us to know the little things.
Yeah.
And granted, I know like a lot of owners, like they don't see those as triggers.
Like
so
I
they
said,
don't
it
think to
was
say
like during the conversation,
Yeah.
I was realizing it, and he in turn was realizing it, and he was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'm seeing it now." Like it's
But
all
I'm
making
sure that
sense.
happens to us all the time, where it's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
there's little things where it's like we find it out like later, where we're like, oh, okay, you know, like there's that missing piece where,
Yep.
you know, I don't know if you would have necessarily changed how you went about your training.
No,
with him
because
at all,
it had already worked for all
Yeah.
intents and purposes.
Yep.
Like we hadn't seen the behavior in months. You know what I mean? But it was like it itched that one part of my brain where I was
Yep.
like, now I know.
Yep.
Like this whole time I've been trying to figure it out, but now I
Right.
know. And that's why I'm so adamant with people about really respecting your dog's autonomy and their boundaries right off the bat, because you never want them to act aggressively towards you, and you have to look at it and be like, fair.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to be in that position, because now your dog knows they can aggress towards you in a certain way, and it would be unfair of you to say you're not allowed to do that when you were the one poking the bear and causing the issues.
Push them to that point where they feel
Yeah.
like they had to, that was their only option.
Yes.
Yep.
Like there was a time where like my husband with Snoop, he like would like get in his face and like scratch his little cheeks, you know what I mean? And like get real close to him. And I could tell it made Snoop very uncomfortable and he didn't like it. And he tolerated it for a bit. And then the one day he like raised his lip at him. And I told my husband, I said, you're never doing that again.
Yeah.
I said, because I'm not going to have a dog who thinks that he can raise his lips or snap at us or growl or do things because we're not respecting his space.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And he hasn't done it since.
Yeah.
But those are like how you ease yourself into problems with your dog.
Absolutely.
You have to like recognize that you have to love your dog in the way that they want to be loved, not the way that you want to love them.
Yes.
And humans are very affectionate, and like kissing and hugging is very natural in the human world. But in dogs, it's not so natural, and those things can feel very threatening and overwhelming. And if you're really trying to do best by your dog, then we have to respect how they want to be loved. Do they, instead of kisses and hugs, do they want you to throw a ball for them?
Yeah.
Can you do something else, to show your affection if your dog does not like that display of affection?
Yeah.
It would be like, you telling Justin, like, I hate white chocolate. And then every special celebration, he gets you white chocolate. And then you one day, you go, listen, it's nice you're getting me something, but like, I told you I don't like this.
Yeah.
Do you think you give me something else? And then him having the gall to be like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Not
Right.
be
Like,
grateful.
I like white chocolate, so I was going to have some of it.
That's literally what it is. It's like every time we force our dogs to tolerate a hug or to
Yeah.
tolerate getting in their face or to tolerate a belly rub if they don't like it. You know what I mean? You're making them do something that they clearly tell you they don't like and is unnecessary.
Yep.
And you're just-
sometimes
It
dogs
literally
do
has
like
no
that.
benefit.
Like
Right.
there
Yeah.
are dogs that do like affection and they do like that stuff. So don't come for us being
Yeah.
like, well, my Australian Shepherd loves to be kissed and hugged. He probably doesn't. But
He probably doesn't. I've never met a dog that liked hugs. There's just dogs that tolerate them better than others.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
So.
Sully.
anywho, sorry.
So every time I give him a hug, he's like, okay, here we go.
Uh-huh. But cool. I think that was a good idea, Bridget.
Yeah. So
Very good idea.
Yeah.
maybe we'll do more of that sometime.
Yeah, maybe if you guys have hypotheticals
Yeah.
Let us
or
know.
real life
Situations.
situations or whatever.
Or if you're a trainer and you're watching this and you have a client question with one of your clients,
Yeah.
fire away.
Yeah. We can discuss
hearing
it.
it.
Do all the ins and outs. It'll probably be harder because we can't like ask questions about the situation.
So
Because
a
I
lot
always
of
feel
this
like I need to
is-
know more.
Yeah.
But
It's
So
a lot
make
of
it as detailed as you can.
prodding information, and the first session is often like trying to get as much information as
Do
you
exactly.
yeah,
like
you
we
have
did
to.
today.
Part of being a really good trainer, and this is something that comes with experience, is like knowing what questions to ask.
Yes.
To get the information that you need, because you're dealing with clients that like they have no idea.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
they're going to overthink.
They don't know what
certain
they don't
things.
know.
Right.
They're not deliberately keeping information from you necessarily or anything. They just don't know what's pertinent and what isn't.
Exactly.
You know?
Yep. Yeah. A lot of people are like, yes, it's unknowing their mistakes that they're
Yeah.
making or whatever the dog's mistakes that they're making that can influence little things. So,
Yep.
Yep. And also for the people that do knowingly like lie and stuff, like don't
How
be
dare
don't I think a
you.
lot of
Trainer.
people do it because of embarrassment.
Sure,
And it's
yeah.
something where it's just like you need to look
I'm not
past
gonna
that
judge
when
you.
you're coming to training, right?
Yeah.
Not telling us those little things that maybe you're embarrassed telling everyone else about
Yeah.
isn't going to help.
No.
Right? We need to know those little
And
things that you're doing or
if-
someone else is doing.
Any trainer makes you feel stupid or silly or shames you or judges you for any information you're telling them to be honest about, go
Yes.
find somebody else.
Yes, absolutely.
That is not somebody you want helping you. Because I will never make my client, I will never intentionally make my client feel stupid
Yeah.
over just being honest with me.
Yep.
They're there and they're trying to learn. And so us as trainers need to remember that.
And they
that
hired you.
they're
for
already in a
reason.
very vulnerable position. So
Dog training is super emotional, and it sparks a lot of like sadness and happiness, and raising a dog itself is so emotional. So just be kind, like when you're talking to people, and realize that they're here to do their best by their dog.
Yep.
And they're asking you for help. So
Mm-hmm.
be nice.
Exactly.
And be nice on the internet too. I see some of y'all.
That's a tall order.
Uh-huh.
That's a tall order. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today, guys.
Yeah. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed.
The awkward smile.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.